Welcome to Season 2 of Lucid Cafe. I'm your host, Wendy Halley. I hope you had the best summer ever. It was a wee bit short here in Vermont. Plus time is speeding up, which made summer feel like it was about 3 weeks long. I won't whine about it, although it is pretty sad. But it's good to be back in front of the mic. This season of Lucid Cafe is shaping up to be a good one. So far, I've talked with some really fascinating people about their innovative work in the realm of alternative healing. And others came on and shared powerful, candid stories of profound healing, episodes that I hope will inspire you and invite you to think about healing in an expanded way. It's all about radical wellness here at the Lucid Cafe. But before we dive into today's kick-ass episode, I want to talk with you briefly about a decision I made over the summer. I love podcasts. I'm an avid podcast consumer. I love that there are over 700,000 shows available to anyone for free on pretty much any topic you can think of, including knitting. Someone told me that recently. I love producing, hosting, and editing this podcast, as well as the satirical True Advice podcast I co-host with my buddy Claire. It's like true crime, only helpful. And my goal is to keep both shows ad-free. If you enjoy Lucid Cafe, there are several ways you can support it. You can help spread the word and let others know about the show. You can give it a positive review on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. Or you can help allay the production and hosting costs by becoming a sponsor by making a one-time or monthly donation of any amount on the podcast page of my website, lucidpathwellness.com, or by using the link in the show notes. No matter how you show your support, just know that my gratitude is bigger than the entire universe. It's huge. As the audience grows, my plan is to one day create live events with amazing guests and water balloon fights. Sweet, right? All right, on with the show. I wanted to start this season out with a bang, and I think today's guest far exceeded my hopes. Mayda Poc has quite a story, and it's an inspirational one. She is a life and career coach for executives and entrepreneurs and is on a mission to help overachievers find more balance and clarity in their lives and in their careers with a side of purpose. Prior to becoming a certified coach and hypnotist, Mayda spent about 16 years in investment banking and finance and in different executive roles before a personal crisis or two or three invited her into a new life. She now helps executives and entrepreneurs feel more at home in their lives, their relationships, their careers, their families, and their environment. Her clients are high achievers, successful career men and women, visionary CEOs, and executives in finance, banking, big law firms, and startups. I hope you enjoy my incredible conversation with Mayda Poc. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now I'm really excited to have this conversation and to learn about you. I'm intrigued by the little bit I know. So why don't you start by telling us what kind of work you're doing right now?
Right now, I am a life and career coach, and I coach people, women, mainly men as well, in the financial industry or lawyers, executive type of overachievers. And overachievers is one of those words that make people, wonder. Overachievers.
I love that.
Yeah, we most of us have a form of overachieving, but
I'm familiar with the word. Yes,
theirs
I'm
is
very familiar.
Take it to the extreme. The challenges, the thrill seekers, the challenge seekers as well. And most of these people come from more or less the same career background as I do, because I used to work in finance. I was in investment banking for 16 years. I'm kind of familiar with what it is to work in investment banking and finance, the long hours, the developing thick skin type of places where you have to be, and having this longing at a point in your life where you're not unhappy, but you're not happy either. There is something inside that says, now what? I'm not satisfied. I love the money, no doubt about that, but am I really doing something that is honoring my mission in life? Am I doing something that is honoring my knowledge? Am I honoring myself? And this is where we meet. Somehow we meet.
You're talking about you and your clients.
Me and my clients, yes.
Yes. Okay. So you work with executives who are overachievers. You can relate to them because you come from this world.
Yes.
And how is it that you work with them? What do you do?
Well, let's start by the beginning. Most of them come because they have a career concern at that point. So the initial request is, I want to be promoted, or I'm not happy with my job and I want to find another job. And for some of them, they come and say, I'm done and I want to find a new career, help me. This is the initial point. As you know, it's not only about the career. It's about where you are right now with yourself. And this is where we start the work. We start by giving them the tools to be happy where they are, to feel at ease where they are. Overachievers typically are people who have this larger than life personality in terms of of their capacity to do things, but they feel so small because they have so many limitations that they put in their heads. And it's called perfectionism, and it's called control. It's all the same thing.
And never satisfied.
Ever. It's never living in the moment. It's always, what is the next? And the next can not only be something good for them, but for a lot of them, the next is getting fired, getting laid off, a catastrophe or crisis of some sort. So being happy where you are is not about, making a gratitude list. It's about really owning where you are and what you are. And one of the things that I see in them is reflecting back. I do reflect back to them what I see in them that they don't see in themselves. It's a bit circumvoluted, but quite often when you are an overachiever, when you have done all these big schools and you have been really prepped by your family and groomed to go into these kind of businesses, because there is an initial grooming, no matter where your family is coming from, whether you're an immigrant, whether you come from a wealthy family, there's a lot of grooming to get you there. And quite often, you don't know your value. You don't know what you are bringing to the table. You just know that you go to work, you're not necessarily very happy getting up in the morning, but you do, because you have a family and you need the money and this is your job and you don't know any better. And then you go to work and comes a time where you just, okay, what is happening here? So step number one is, let's go back to basics. Who are you? What is your value? Who are you as a father, a mother, or a professional at work? And then from that point of view, we start working on what they want. And sometimes it's not easy because most of us know what we don't want. But what we want, I don't know. That is the answer, right?
Right. Or we might think we know what we want. And then when we get it, we discover that it actually wasn't the thing that we had in our mind. And it's really can be just crazy disappointing.
Be careful what you wish for. It's
exactly.
exactly that. And this is really the bulk of the work that we do together. So it's not only about wanting a job, as you said, that's their initial ask or their initial goal. It's about, how do you want to be in your life? Who do you want to be? What kind of person? What kind of environment you want to work with? And we work on several things. We work on a lot of the proverbial limiting beliefs, of course. We work a lot on money issues because, contrary to what the wisdom might think is that it's not because you earn a lot of money that you feel wealthy. For a lot of these people, they actually live in a lot of lack and scarcity mentality, because when you work in the financial industry, you can lose everything very quickly. You know that, you can see it. So you always have that in the background. So the idea is also to go beyond that, to transcend that you are not your paycheck, that you are not the provider in your family, and that there is something more to your life than just, the daily grind and going to work and coming back with nice paycheck, but not feeling that happy or that enjoying it.
So I'm curious about your relationship with money, if you don't mind going down that road for a little bit. I'm curious because I think this is something everyone struggles with.
Yes.
Has your relationship with money changed since you studied finance to now?
Yes, dramatically, and for much better. I come from a family that had money stories. We all do, but mine is very particular in the sense that my mother comes from a wealthy family that lost all their belongings and all their money for different reasons. And my dad comes from an immigrant family. Both families were living in Syria and Damascus. And my dad is a self-made man. He made some money in his life, and then we had to leave Syria. So everything lost again, going to France and starting again from zero. And when you are from a family that had to do that several times, and their parents had to do that several times, you are conditioned as a child to always think that there is always a shoe that is going to drop somewhere. So a big part of my middle life, I would say, in finance was around that kind of mentality, because at the same time I was surrounded by people who were thinking the same. They were always talking about investments, about losing money, sometimes about earning money. Money is the subject in investment banking. Before entering investment banking, money was a nice side effect for me. It was, I do what I like, I feel centered, I enjoy what I do, and money will come. But as I continued being part of that system, then I started picking up. I'm a sponge naturally of other people's feelings and thoughts. And I started picking up on all this. And the culmination.
Are you talking about the culture? You were kind of embedded in this culture?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's exactly that. It's the culture is any kind of discussion will always somehow turn about money and investments and somebody losing money and somebody making money. These are, in investment banking, you earn a decent living, but it's never enough. It's never enough because there is always someone who earns more than you. Always. That's the nature of the business. And of course, you have all these, when you go on TV, when you look up the internet, you will always have these crazy bonuses that other people earn that you don't. And you think, well, why can't I have this?
So you're always comparing.
Always.
And you're also aware of all the things that could go really wrong because you're working in it. You're constantly surrounded by it. So I imagine it's just on your radar all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not a fun way to live.
No, and came 2008 and with a big financial crisis.
Right.
And that was a huge eye opener for me because growing up in Syria, you live in a dictatorship. So there are some good things about a dictatorship, which is a false sense of security. You feel there is protection somehow, but you are always in this sense of survival. You're always fearing for your life. You're always fearing for your family's life. There is never this kind of peace of mind where you are at home and say, okay, I'm safe. Everything is fine.
So what felt threatening about a dictatorship? I'm just trying to imagine what your day-to-day life was like.
It was the most difficult part for me when I was living in Syria was, well, first of all, there was this constant reminder that we were at war with Israel. and not really understanding why we're doing this. Most people I was around did not want to go to war, where had no beef with or against Israel or any of the neighbors, because Syria was more or less at war with everyone. So it's also always this sense of war. And the second thing is the sense of unsafety, that whatever you speak, whatever you say, somebody can pick it up and go and denounce you, and you're done, basically. Your family. I'm a girl. So there are a lot of...
So you have to be on guard constantly.
Yes.
In that. Okay, that sounds horrific. It sounds like a terrible way to live.
It is. Yeah. But when you see that on the other side as well, for a lot of people, living in Syria was somehow a contract. You give up your freedom, your liberty, for a sense of safety. And the safety in Syria was a safety against extremisms, because these are also something that was quite dominant in the region. So what goes there is a sense of chicken and egg. Is extremism made because there is a dictatorship, or does dictatorship become a dictatorship against extremism? So there is a lot of this going on.
Wow, that's so heavy. I think in our culture in the United States, we have ideas of what it might be like, but to actually know and understand what it's like to live every day like that, I can't even, I mean, I don't think we really have a clue.
I would say it's not so much the absence of freedom that is the worst. It's really the permanent fear of losing your life. So it's even one level below, the Maslow pyramid. It's even lower than that. It's permanently, you don't know whether tomorrow you will be alive, whether tomorrow you will not be tortured. You don't know. So you learn as a kid to live with it. And your parents, actually, one of the wonderful things about, I have to say, about Middle Eastern people, and Syrian people in particular, but also Lebanese, because my family is of Lebanese descent as well, is that very quickly you learn how to live with what you have. And it means that every day you are happy to be with your family. You have a sense of community. Having a Christmas dinner or a Sunday lunch, or for some people it was a Friday lunch or Saturday lunch, is important. It's a celebration. You don't take things for granted. You don't go into this kind of overthinking. We go into here as in, what is my life purpose? I'm not finding my life purpose.
You're just appreciating every morsel, every opportunity you get to enjoy your family, your life. That's a much different frame to be living your life through.
Yeah. You appreciate just being alive. You appreciate the joys. You appreciate the foods. You appreciate the party. Most of Middle Eastern people, I'm not talking about all of them, but most of the Middle Eastern people have the same aspirations as everybody else. They just want safety for their kids. They want a future for their kids, and they want a happy and peaceful life for themselves. And this is where this contract happens within dictatorships, and it was the case in Iraq as well, is that you cannot accept certain things because what you think is the other option is not an option for you at all, because it's going to be so dramatic, and it's going to be so bad and so horrifying that you'd rather feel content with where you are right now.
So how old were you when you left Syria?
I was 11.
A good chunk of your childhood was spent in Syria. Okay.
Yeah.
Growing up in that environment, did that kind of inform your relationship with money, getting back to that?
Yes, because as much as I could train myself to think that I'm earning enough money and I have enough money, I always have in the background my family's history and my own history. And this is something that is very insidious in a way, because I can train myself 20 times a day. I can tell myself I'm safe, all is fine, nothing is going to happen. But 1, 2, 3 events happen, and the first event triggers everything back. 2008, as we were discussing, what was a huge eye-opener. It was, I felt, I don't remember feeling so unsafe in my life. And I was blessed. I have a lovely apartment. I have a lovely husband and a lovely cat, and all was well, and we're all safe and healthy. But in my mind, I would see people around me who had these ginormous houses, and they were losing everything because they were overextended, because they were over-leveraged. So a lot of the focus was on people who were losing their houses everywhere. And most of them were people who had nothing to begin with. And they have been sold this dream of becoming an owner, of ownership. And then there were people who were more motivated by greed than by service, who gave them all these loans. They were losing all their houses, but so were a lot of the people around me. And for me, it was a huge trigger. I went into some sort of personal trauma. It's a big word, but it was, for me, it was everything was happening again, and I wasn't safe. And then other things happened. So quite recently, 2 years ago, I'm French and I'm American citizen on the citizenship side. And I was born in France as well. And I'm saying this because I want to explain something, is that quite recently there was a decree that was taken that the US would not allow people from Syrian and certain number of countries, even if they were French citizens, whatever their citizenship, the only fact that they were born in these countries, they would not be allowed to come here into the US. And for me, I had a meltdown. They were coming from me and they were taking everything away. This is how irrational I was. And my husband was there. It's like, be logical. Nothing is going to happen. What are you talking about? But this is how bad these early memories can be and can completely condition my behavior so many years later.
So it makes perfect sense to me. You said trauma is a big word, but trauma is an appropriate word for what you're describing, what you went through. Of course, all of that would come right back to the surface in a really monumental way. How could it not?
One of the things that fascinates me in my life, it's very self-serving, but I'm saying my life because I can see it in other people too. And that's why I share these stories as well, is that it doesn't really, there are certain traumas are very heavy, but most of us had traumas throughout our lives without being, these huge, but still we carry all this in our bodies, and then we act them out in very unrelated situations. And certainly money is one of those discussions that can trigger a lot of issues. And
well, yes, survival being a very primary one.
Yes. Yes.
Trauma is universal. I think just being a human being, it's not an easy thing. I've said that a lot, that being human is super challenging, and it's relative too, right? What's traumatic to one person can be not traumatic to another person. What I'm curious about is, you're clearly really resilient.
Yes, I was going to get to that word. Okay. Actually, yes, it's exactly that. And I think we all are, and we just don't maybe qualify it that way, or we get into a point of so much desperation in a way that we are not finding this resilience. We think, the whole world has collapsed, or you have this, a lot of us at certain points in our lives, we get into this midlife crisis. And midlife crisis happens at 25. I had it at almost every 3 years in my life. So
every 3 years you had a midlife crisis.
Yes, starting at age 20, probably. So the midlife crisis is just a crisis. It's just a time where you have to stop. You don't stop because you cannot, because you tell yourself you cannot, right? It's so much easier to continue doing the same things on and on and whine about it and complain about it, but do nothing about it. It's very pleasing as well. And all of a sudden you have an event that happens, a crisis, a personal crisis. And with this personal crisis, you have the choice. You either stay with it and it becomes your story, or you decide, okay, this shit happened, and it happened. I usually give myself like a day to kind of go into why me? And then after that, it's like, okay, what can I do about it? What is within my control? And then once all is solved, or once I'm a bit more mature about it, emotionally mature about it, I look back and I say, okay, what was the lesson? And this is what life is about. And I think this is what is being resilient, is being resourceful, but knowing that you are resourceful and getting up and not letting any story or any past define you. It's something you share. It's something that you learn from. It's probably most likely something that happened to you so that you develop tools, you develop techniques and strategies around it, because you will meet someone who has gone through something more or less similar, or there's a lot of analogy, and you will be called to use what you learned from that to heal that person. This is how we help each other, one person at a time.
So it's very purposeful. It's looking at, this is happening to me, and how am I going to evolve as a result of this? And then how am I going to use my experience to be of service to others?
Yes.
I think I found in my own practice, the really tricky part is if somebody has a perspective of being a victim, mm-hmm. and that they're at the mercy of everyone and everything around them, it can feel kind of monumental, or it can feel really impossible to overcome trauma and adversity, because they don't believe that they have the capacity within themselves to overcome it, because they're just waiting for the next shoe to drop. They're just constantly waiting for another event to make them feel powerless. It's such a hard belief system to challenge yourself with, because then you have to take responsibility. Yeah. And that's a really hard pill to swallow for a lot of us, is the idea of seeing yourself as powerful can be really scary.
Yeah. It can be very scary as well when you have also all these survival issues as well, because some people want to be seen. Some people know they are powerful, but they want to be seen and heard. And me, I belong to the other category of people who don't want to be seen. And I don't want people to start attacking me or trolling me. So I carry this a lot. And this is a limiting belief. And this is something that with time, I get more comfortable with. And going back to the victim mentality, which we all have, because also we live in societies that tend to give a lot of, and rightfully so, but a lot of time to the victims. We evolved from societies that nobody cared about the victim to a society where a victim becomes the center of attention. And sometimes the same way when for some kids being ill is a good way to have mommy's attention, becoming victim is not necessarily to have somebody's attention, but to be left alone, so that, you know what, there's nothing I can do. Don't try to get me out of it. It's a comfortable place, because it's comfortable but not comfortable, but it's a place.
But it serves a purpose. Yeah,
absolutely.
It helps in some way. Yeah, that's a great point. So mm-hmm. The crash happens in 2008. How did that end up impacting your career?
It did not. Oh, it did not at all. I continued, but I was
okay. So it was just a very difficult emotional experience.
Yes, from a survival and money point of view, it was a very, very difficult time in my life. Mostly because of my belief system, and mostly because it put into action or into motion a lot of survival mechanisms that I didn't have necessarily before. So for me, it was a time where I started working even more than before, all my weekends, all my holidays, whatever happened, I was always in a deep stress of losing everything, and
Kind of overdrive.
completely. And you know what happens when you deplete yourself, when you don't stop and you don't even know that you deplete yourself. You get to that crisis moment, and the crisis moment was cancer.
Ah,
And this completely changed my life somehow.
a cancer diagnosis.
Cancer. So I was sick for 2 years, and it was for 2 years. For first year, I was really sick at that time, but I was fully functional, still waking up at 4 a.m, still doing my usual stuff, being my usual self. And at a point, I could not breathe anymore. I couldn't walk, I couldn't breathe.
Oh my.
So the diagnosis was asthma, and of course, synchronicities happen. And my acupuncturist sent me to a friend of hers to check my nose, my lungs, and from there they sent me to an X-ray scan, and from there it was done. I had biopsies and advanced cancer, and I had a lymphoma, and I had it really all over, and a huge part of my thorax was actually completely pressurized by a huge lymphoma, malignant lymphoma node. That's why I couldn't breathe. And on top of that, there was a second cancer as well in my lungs. But this one, I never really wanted to know what it was about. It was enough to deal with the other one. So was it an eye opener at that time? No. I continued working. I asked my doctors to help me continue working.
Really?
All like before, except I negotiated with my boss at that time that the day where I receive chemotherapy, I will not work. Okay. And the 3 days after, I'll work from home. But I was working from home. I would wake up at 4 and in the morning and do my job, work on weekends, most of the weekends. But it's really 1 year later that all the accumulation of all the stress of pushing myself, pushing myself, came to a halt when one day I went into a crisis of stress. It's almost difficult to describe the state I was in. And in my head, there was this voice that said, now you have the choice. You either continue like this, but you're going to get it back. It's a guarantee. There's, you do the same, you continue doing the same thing, you will get the same results. It's normal. Or you take a leap of faith and you start exploring new avenues. And this is where I quit my job.
Really?
The reason why I did not quit between all that time was my fear of money, of not having enough money, of not surviving. And at that time, it was one of the most anxiety.
So that was more frightening than your health crisis.
Oh yeah. Health crisis was, I was, not that I wasn't delusional or anything. I was very much aware of what it was. And I was very much aware that Hodgkin's lymphoma required a very heavy course of chemotherapy. Plus it was more advanced. So my chances, it's a highly curable cancer, but my chances were not in these first odds, but more in the smaller part. But I was very accepting. I was in that state of surrender, as in, I don't know what's going to happen, and it is what it is. It's just a challenge, and I will go through it, and I will see. And I have options. I give myself options. I have the option to stop working, and if I stop working, nobody will say anything because I'm sick. So I had that excuse. For me, it was a very pleasant excuse as well. But as much as I can continue, I'm doing this for myself, and this is where all these crazy synchronicities starting happening to me. All of a sudden, the oncologists that I started meeting, from friends, from my boss, and what have you, one of them was a guy who knew my mother's family from Lebanon, and he was very highly respected here in New York City. The doctor I ultimately going to at the hospital studied in Damascus. He was a Syrian doctor. I mean, what are the odds?
Wow.
But also, what was very interesting for me in that moment is this is where I found myself being resourceful and hearing about an app that was called Beating Cancer. So I don't beat cancer. I was like, I'm not beating anything. Cancer is in me. I am cancer as well. So I'm not going to beat anything, but I'm going to work with it. And I want to befriend it and I want to talk to it. So
that's very shamanic.
Yes. And it's
good for you.
Thank you. And thank you even more because it was really it was a time where I stepped up as a teacher for other people. The teacher in me said, you don't beat anything inside of you unless it's a virus or it's a parasite, but anything that happens to you is just, it's an energy issue. So I didn't know anything about energy at that time, but for me, it was obvious that you don't go and beat cancer. You don't go and beat yourself up, right? It's the same thing. I became also the teacher in the sense where there were times that were a bit iffy, to say the least. But I developed a lot of strategies around this. So in the morning, I had sometimes around 25 pills to take every morning, because you have the pills for the disease, and then you have the pills for the side effects of the disease, and
the side effects of the pills.
Yes. So you end up, and
oh man,
so I bought these little miniature jam glass jars. And I would put them there. And every morning I would decide today I will start with the blue, then I will go to the red, and then I will go to the second blue. It was like I was making fun of the situation.
So this, how to make pill taking fun.
Yeah. And
okay.
a lot of things like this. I think we all have our ways of coping.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's normal to feel frightened. It's normal to feel desperate. And it's totally normal to feel victim, because from at that time, I would say, what did I do to deserve this? I don't take pills. I have been eating organic food since I was 20. Nobody ate organic food at that time. I was the nut job who did that. I don't go to doctors. I only have acupuncture. I only have homeopathy. This is not fair. So you start there, and then you say, okay, fair or unfair, it is what it is. What can I do about it? So I started doing as well some visualization on me. Every morning I would wake up and I would start seeing my white cells in my blood, because I had blood cancer, going into the bloodstream and just going and talking to my cancerous cells and ask them, do you have any usefulness here? And if it's no, do you mind leaving, right? And I would give them back to Mother Earth, because our waste is also something that Mother Earth very kindly uses to create another form of life. So I did that. And for example, I was supposed to lose all my hair. I have a lot of hair, but I was supposed to lose it all. That was my biggest moment of desperation. It was, I can put up with anything, but losing my hair and going to the bank, where it was mostly men, and having to deal with, they all knew what was happening, but mostly having to deal with a wig and spending my time wondering if there is wind outside and the wig is going. This is the overthinker in me. And I'm not doing that. So I prayed. And I prayed that day. I prayed for maybe 5 minutes, but it was from the deepest inside of me. It was, please, I can put up with everything, and I did everything you want me to do, but not this. So I lost a lot of hair, but I never put my wig. Unless you knew what was going on, because the hair was a bit, all over the place, but unless you knew what was going on, you couldn't have known that I had chemotherapy. And this is also the teacher in me, is there are times where you step into your power. But we have this idea that power is being the president, or or overcoming something.
Status, yeah.
And power has nothing to do with it, and it's a very personal thing. And I'm an introvert mostly, so power for me is not to be. I don't mind doing public speaking, but it's not that for me. Power is when I feel centered, when I feel genuine, when I feel that what I have overcame is something that can benefit a lot of other people. And I'm not saying it's simple, but you can adapt everything that happened to other people without having to go through it yourself again. That's not very efficient.
Right. That is an amazing way to go about your work. It's kind of the idea of the wounded healer, right?
Yes.
Not to remain wounded, but to move through that and to come out on the other side with all the wisdom you've garnered from the experience, and then be able to share that wisdom with others. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
It's exactly that. And it's also meeting people where they are. So there are a lot of things that I believe in. I believe in energies. I believe in shamanism. I believe in woo-woo stuff. And I believe in that because I tested them on myself. I'm not someone who would go and say, oh, hypnosis is great. Hypnosis works. No, I tested on myself, and this is how I know it works. So I help people as well, and I put them in hypnotic states for performance issues or for changing their habits. So where I meet people is that I don't go and start talking to them about law of attraction or energy healing or soul contracts or whatever. It's not the case. It's meeting people where they are, is working with their belief system. It's their journey. It's for them to get away from that victim mentality if they are there, within their own resources that they find within themselves. I have the tools, but the resources, this is something that they need to create, and that's how they reinvent themselves, is by finding their power.
Exactly. Yes. I love it. Yeah, I like to talk with the people who come to work with me about the importance of their motivation too. I don't want someone's power. I don't want them to give me the power to heal them or fix them or make their lives better, because that's not how it works anyway. I feel like my role is to help remind you how powerful you are, so that you can take the ball and run with it from there. And it sounds like you have a very similar approach. And also the idea of, I use myself as a guinea pig too. The only things that I'll use are things I've used on myself. And if they're effective, then I feel comfortable sharing that with others, instead of, oh, I read this in a book, so let me share this information I read in a book with you. And go heal.
Go heal.
Good job. All right.
Yeah, it's exactly that. I think also I used to say you don't need to have cancer to know what cancer is, for two reasons. Number one, because I hope that we are evolving as a society who is learning more and more compassion. And compassion is not going and living what other people are living, but understanding where they are, putting yourself in their shoes for 2 seconds, but really in their shoes, not in yours, not with your agenda, not with your programming. And then saying, okay, I respect your journey. I respect where you are. How can I help you? So this is compassion for me.
And true empathy.
And true empathy, yes. Because sometimes we go into empathy. It was like, oh, if this happened to me. Well, no, that's not the point. It's not understanding what is happening to another person from your point of view. It's really from their point of view. Because when you come with an agenda, you are tainting already, and you are projecting on other person, you're programming your vision of the world. And this is what we're doing right now, unfortunately.
Right.
We don't seem to be talking to each other. We bark at each other. We hate each other. And both sides have very valid points. Both sides.
Yes.
But nobody wants to listen.
Yeah, nobody's hearing the other side's
Absolutely.
points.
It's because they're scared. Because what if the other person is actually right? as well. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It means that maybe there is somewhere in the middle where we can put all our goodies together.
Yeah, you might have to compromise or change the way you think about something, which can be really threatening, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious about your cancer journey. Well, first of all, how is your health now?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very happy. I credit all this inner work that I did as well with the fact that I did not have any return, and it actually after a few chemotherapy sessions, it's actually receded very quickly. So I was very lucky from that point of
Beautiful.
view.
Okay. And so, what did you learn from the cancer experience?
I learned something that is very valuable that I'm trying to apply. I don't always. I would love to walk that talk all the time, but I don't always do it. So it's a very conscious effort for me. It's called letting go. And this is the hardest thing on earth when you have developed this coping mechanism called perfectionism. It's terrible because asking yourself to do your best, and then you don't need to reread the same thing 6 times. You're done it. After that, if there are mistakes, it's fine. It's human. You're not God. You will make mistakes. Even God, I think, makes mistakes. But letting go is also having trust that things will unfold the right way for you. It doesn't mean getting what you want immediately, because as we discussed earlier, be careful what you wish for. You don't know what's going to happen. But it's saying that when you find your place, when you find yourself in a space where you are congruent with what you are, when you know what you want, when you know what you don't want, when you know which person you want to be, the kind person, the compassionate person, the teacher, whatever you think is the best version of yourself. When you are this person, things will happen the right way for you. And I promise they do. It's unbelievable. If I went into cancer crying and shouting and feeling pissed at the whole world because what on earth, what did I do? I did that for one day, but not more. I would have, from a pure scientific, logical point of view, I would have created so much stress in my body that my body was already fighting a part of itself that wasn't agreeing with itself, and you add a level of stress. What is happening there? But you don't need cancer to learn that. You just need to observe your life right now, where you are. Where are the times where you get all so worked up on things that don't matter? So it doesn't mean that you have to ignore what doesn't matter, but it means that look at yourself and understand what these things that don't matter are trying to teach you.
Okay.
And go from this point of view that everything, all the people, even people who irk you, even these politicians that you would like to punch in the face sometimes, they are teaching you something. They are teaching you that you can have no experience in politics and become president of the biggest country on earth.
Yeah, imagine that.
So imagine what you can do.
Who would have thought? I'm curious, can you talk a little bit more about what letting go means to you?
Yes.
Because it is a big concept, and I think a lot of people will talk about, oh, you should just let that go. But it's much easier said than done.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
So it starts with being conscious of my own reactions. And this means it starts by obliging myself to be present to what's happening. This is the most difficult thing because my head is always somewhere else. My head is always in the past or in the future, rarely in the present. So it means learning to be present with the experience. And even when it's a painful experience, especially when it's somebody who is irritating me, is why is this person irritating me so much? Understanding that it's mostly because I'm not inventing anything here. They have something that I'm refusing to see in myself. Once you have accepted this shadow side of you and accepted that, hey, I can be a very violent person too, but this is my way of defending myself. And as you said, we live on Earth, and it's not necessarily a very easy place to be. And yes, we need to defend ourselves too. There's nothing unspiritual about telling someone to take a hike. It's called boundaries, and it's called respecting yourself as well, and especially respecting yourself when people are not respectful to you. So this starts there, and this is the bulk of the work, because this is every day.
No,
Every
it's
day.
huge. What you're talking about is huge. Yeah.
And with time, I realized that a lot of these things that I was very reactive to, I have a pinch in the heart, as in, okay, there is something there, but I can move on. Or instead of spending two days talking my husband's head off about 2 hours, it's gone. This is letting go. Letting go is also being clear about the background that goes in the head. All these programming, I don't know how to define this, all these stories that you inherited or that you grew up with, that, for example, we talked about overachievers, that it's you have to be the best, you have to do and more and more and more and more. And what will they say about me if I fail? Well, what do you think they will say anything about you? What can you learn from that? What is more important for you, what they think or what you think of yourself? So it's all about this, having the trust that when you are where you are, when you have a conscious view of your world, then things will unfold without your control, because you cannot control them anyways.
Huge. Really super crazy important points you're bringing up. Amazing. Trust. Trust is big medicine. It's a really challenging road to go down. The road of learning to trust. It's bigger than faith.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your career change. So you were working in finance, and now you're a coach.
Yes.
So how did you make that transition?
It was, talk about faith and trust. It was only that. So I did know that day that I had to leave. There was no way for me to stay. There was no way I would. It was almost like a no choice. It was a choice, obviously, but for me, it was getting sick again or doing something else. And then I just quit. I had that privilege that I have a very, very supportive husband. And he said, and I said, what we're going to do with the money? And he's like, okay, we will figure it out. But what counts is you being healthy. And what counts is you finding something that you love. And the money will come when you love something, when you do something out of your heart versus out of obligations. So I started just going by the day, getting better about my health, having a functional doctor to begin with, the stuff like this, building my body back, because chemo can take its toll, and the effects are quite lasting as well. It's not like your cancer is out, you're done. There is a whole rebuilding of the body.
Wow. Okay.
So after that, this is also a very important part of work for people who are just out of cancer, and there are a lot of support groups around that as well. I didn't need it, but it's out there if somebody needs to hear that. And then it was just about, what do I want to do? And I've always been extremely passionate about food and nutrition. So I did health coaching. I started the training of health coaching. And during the training, I realized that I'm really not happy doing that. There is something very scary about it. I don't feel that I'm in a position to help people get better at their health, and it doesn't work for me. In the meantime, my sister, who is a hypnotherapist in Paris, kept on nagging me, you should go into hypnosis. This is right up your alley. This is, intellectual. This is for you, blah, blah, blah. So I started studying hypnotherapy. And in the meantime, another person with my sister came and contacted me and said, we're doing this life coaching training in France, in Geneva. Would you like to join? You can, they authorize, so there are in person and there are the people who are via video and remote. And it's like, yeah, sure. And that's it. So it's synchronicity is the trust of me being very scared because I didn't know where I was going. And then you take a step and there is another step that is revealed, but not as a sort of epiphany, but as someone who comes with an idea and you say yes or no. And you continue that path. And then as you continue, all of a sudden you have someone that you knew for a very long time and she has someone she knows who really is in great need of coaching. So you start coaching that person. And then there's another person who comes that way. And then they start sending you the family or the friends and what have you.
And it just took off.
And it takes off. And it's a process. And it required from me something that I'm trying to teach people as well. And it makes me smile because I'm still trying to teach that to myself. It's going from this fixed mindset where you're only interested in an outcome to a growth mindset where where your main interest is learning more and more and learning about yourself and learning about the process. And the outcome will be whatever happens. And whatever happens with this outcome, it will be another learning experience. It's not going from one deadline to another deadline to another deadline, or one milestone to another. It's to reach the next milestone, you have to have new tools with you. You have to have new strategies, new learnings. Otherwise, whatever you're reaching the next, whatever you didn't learn in between step 1, you will learn at step 2 or 3. And sometimes it comes to you in less gentle ways. So it's a good idea.
Very true.
To
Yep.
learn them at the beginning.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Oh my God, no. Sometimes I would, but no.
Based on everything you've been through, what would you tell someone who's facing a really big crisis, whether it's a health crisis or they're in a transitional crisis, any kind of crisis? What comes to you intuitively as I ask that question?
Get help.
Get help.
Don't do it alone, because that's what I do. I try to solve everything by myself. And then I realized that I cannot. So getting help, there's nothing wrong about getting help. And getting help doesn't mean that you have to go through any kind of extremes. Getting help is sometimes just sitting with a friend and someone who you know will be neutral enough not to judge you, and just tell them your story and see what they have to say. So getting help means don't do it alone. Doing it alone is not only not helpful, but it can be quite harmful sometimes, because you go into your own stories and you start churning all the bad things that could happen. Whenever you go and externalize this, whether you're talking to someone, whether you're putting that in a journal, whatever process is yours, that is a very good first step to do. And the second step will come to you.
You have to trust.
You have to trust. You have to trust.
And yeah, you can't buy that. It's a very personal process, right? It's a learning process, learning to trust.
Yeah. And the crises are usually coming to you, among other things, for these same reasons. They are here to say, you have to trust the process. You have to trust that there is something in it for you.
Exactly. Yeah. I was just thinking that I have yet to see when someone is in crisis or just something comes up that there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
You just have to take yourself up on it.
Yeah. The difficult part is that when the crisis gets announced to you, that's not the first thing you see. And it's impossible, because your body, your brain, everything is in upheaval. Everything is your hormones. You're going into all sorts of scenarios in your head.
Right.
This is where you need someone to ground you, to bring you back to, okay, let's talk. What is happening there?
Another great point. Yeah, exactly.
The idea is find a way to calm yourself first. And doing it by yourself can be difficult. Some people do. If you can, that's awesome. You're a master. But talking to someone else, having someone who grounds you, and then define a strategy that works for you. Don't listen to, I did this and it works for me, so you end up doing 20 things, because whatever worked for another person is their process. But define what your strategies are. Take action as well, I would say. And the action is also to talk to other people, because a lot of the times we tend to sit and wait and think, oh, I'm trusting, some people like that have vision boards or whatever. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. But if you don't get out of your home,
You have to take action.
yeah, something needs to happen. And this is, a lot of people talk about co-creation, and co-creation is you taking action, but the action you take is an action that you make a conscious choice of taking. You know why you're taking this. You know what the motivation, and the motivation is good for you, but it's not bad for other people. So all this is your road in a way to living a better life every day. This is how you get from where you are right now to where you want to be, to that future person that you would like to be. And the crisis is sometimes the only message we get, because that's what moves us out of the routine, right? You can be in a very difficult relationship with a spouse for years and just say, well, we have kids, we cannot think about it, and when we talk we go into fights, and then the crisis comes. And this is how you start talking to each other.
Yep, gets your attention.
Exactly. So the idea of, as well, is it would be good if we human beings could learn without crisis. And this is where you do work on yourself. You go into therapies, you do hypnosis, whatever you do, whatever modality works for you, all is valid. Because when you learn how to trust yourself, because that's really what it is you learn how to trust your inner messages, you learn your intuition, you learn to see the signs that trigger you. When you learn all this, then you don't need that big crisis to start taking action. There is someone who says something, and all of a sudden you have this huge fear in your heart, and you think, oh, what is happening? And you realize that there is something that you should have taken care of 5 days ago, and you didn't. So you don't need to wait. You become your own center of advice, of action, of joy. I like that.
It's a worthy goal. So much wisdom spilling out of you. I'm incredibly grateful to you for coming on the show and sharing all of your history, your illness, everything you've learned as a result of this. I'm really thankful to you for coming on and sharing it. It's crazy powerful.
Thank you as well for all the work you're doing. And I'm thankful as well for allowing me to share my story. So thank you very much for that.
I appreciated Mayda in this conversation so much that I invited her to come back on the show. So look for another episode with Mayda, next time focusing on gender and women in the workplace, later on this season. If you would like to learn more about Mayda's work, please visit her website, MaydaPocCoaching.com. That's MAYDAPOC coaching.com. And thank you so much for listening and for supporting Lucid Cafe by giving it a positive review, helping to spread the word, or sponsoring the show with a one-time or monthly donation. Of all the podcast listeners out there, you're definitely the best. I know this because I'm very psychic. Until next time, pleasant dreams.